I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. Would you read the hearing notice, please?
Hearing notice, Cape Cod Commission. Under the provisions of the Cape Cod Commission Act in 1990, the Commission prepared a regional policy plan that outlines a coherent set of planning policies and objectives to guide development on Cape Cod and to protect its resources. The Act requires the regional policy plan be reviewed and amended at intervals not to exceed 5 years. The regional policy plan was first amended in 1996 and in 2002. The Commission is holding a public hearing and shall accept oral and written comments on changes to the regional policy plan on Monday, June 23, 2008 at 7 p.m. in the 1st District Courthouse, Assembly of Delegates Chamber, Route 6A, Barnstable, Mass.
Thank you, Rick. We're the Planning Committee. I will introduce myself. I'm Herbert Olson. Next to me is Brad Kroll. Next to him, Jay Savala, and finally, Greenie M. The public comment period following this hearing is open until the 3rd of August. And written comments may be sent by U.S. mail to the Commission. Attention, Sharon Rooney, Post Office Box 226, Barnstable, Mass. 02630, by fax to 508-362-3136, or by email to sharonrooney@capecodcommission.org. Now, our procedure this evening will be to begin with Sharon Rooney, Senior Planner, who will explain the differences in the 2008 or 9 plan. And following that, we will receive public comments. Thank you. Sharon?
Thank you. For the record, again, Sharon Rooney, Chief Planner for the Commission. Before I do have a brief slide presentation, but as Herb noted in the hearing notice, we're to update the regional policy plan every 5 years, and we're engaged in that effort right now. And as Herb said, the comment period actually will be till August 4th, and so these 3 public hearings are designed to solicit comment, but also, we're conducting outreach to various groups and organizations across the Cape. So if you have suggestions for other groups that we might give this presentation to, or to have a discussion on the plan, we'd be happy to do that, and please let me know. So if someone could get the lights for me, I'll get this. Many of you may be familiar with the 21st Century Task Force that reviewed the Commission's regulatory practices back in 2006. And there were many recommendations that came out of that task force report. There are 4 of them that relate specifically to the regional policy plan, and I'll be covering those in my presentation.
Sharon, before you go forward, is it possible that you could move that screen over there because everybody's looking that way?
Yeah. Sure, if you want to give us a second.
This one, Bill?
Well, as I began, the 21st Century Task Force had many recommendations to address the Commission's regulatory practices, and there are 4 that relate to the regional policy plan itself, and I'll be highlighting those. First, this first one was that the document be separated into distinct planning and regulatory sections. You might recall that the 2002, the current regional policy plan, consists of 5 sections. An introduction, a very large section containing both planning and regulation, a section on resources of regional importance, regional coordination, and an appendix and maps. The 2008 draft of the plan does, as the task force recommended, separate the document into 2 distinct sections, one on planning and regulation, with additional emphasis up front in the document on the Commission's growth policy, as well as regional management tools, CAPE resources. There will be a number of additional maps in this version of the plan, and actually many of them are online now that you can check out, and that section on regional coordination. Excuse me. And then the plan, again, is divided equally between planning and regulation in 3 subheadings: growth management, natural systems, and human and built systems. The second recommendation of the task force was to have the Commission take a much more map-based approach to planning. For that reason, this draft at this point does have in it a land use vision map that we've been working with all the towns to create, and that's right up front in the planning section, in the land use section of the document. And I'll be explaining more about this land use vision mapping process as I go along. And this is the draft of the map as it stands right now. You'll see that it looks different in different towns, and I'll explain why, but just to describe that what we've been working on with the towns is to develop a land use vision map in 5 general categories of future land use: economic centers, industrial and service trade areas, villages, resource protection areas, and other. The economic centers, which are highlighted in orange here, are those areas that are being designated for increased development, infill, and redevelopment. The industrial and service trade areas, highlighted in yellow here, what you might typically think of as contractors' yards, warehouses, industrial uses obviously, and the like. The villages highlighted in purple are those areas being designated to not for necessarily increased development potential, but to preserve their historic and community character. And then finally, resource protection areas in tan, and other, that's the white spaces left in between. The resource protection areas are those areas, as you might imagine, of greater environmental, natural resources and cultural resource sensitivity, and less suitable for increased development. And then finally, the other category, the white spaces, are areas that tend to be areas with existing residential development. Now, a little bit about how the maps are being created, the process we're conducting, and why are only some of the towns highlighted right now. The map process has been, it's a 3-step process that has begun, and we've been working for over a year now with town staff, including planners, town planners, other town personnel such as conservation agents, natural resources personnel, and the like, to work on these 5 categories and come up, at least brainstorm with potential areas that might fit these different land use designations. And then the second step in the process is for a public forum to be hosted by the planning board. And that's to gather additional input from both the planning board as well as selectmen, other town officials, and the public on, again, these land use categories and that future vision. And then the final step in the process is for endorsement of the map by the planning board. And the reason that the maps that look the way they do is the towns that are highlighted in dark green here have completed that land use process through the public forum hosted by the planning board. The towns in the lighter green have had considerable staff input and some local board input, but haven't completed that public forum step in the process. And then the towns in red have just had staff input at this point. And I wanted to point out, since there has been some confusion of what does the map actually do at this point as part of its inclusion in the regional policy plan. The map does not change any thresholds on its own. The map simply enables the towns to apply to the commission for flexible DRI thresholds. These are thresholds that could be potentially increased or higher, and therefore have fewer projects reviewed by the commission in economic centers, perhaps lower thresholds in some areas, including resource protection areas where more review by the commission would be involved. The designation of the map also does something else in a few limited areas in the regional policy plan itself. It does make the developments of regional impact, the projects that the commission does review, eligible for some lesser minimum performance standards. And then finally, the framework for this flexible thresholds, this was another of the task force recommendations and a key one, that will be encompassed in a separate set of regulations, the DRI enabling regulations. We hope to have those go forward to the Assembly of Delegates along with the regional policy plan at about the same time, hopefully in September or fall of this year. And the fourth major task force recommendation that deals with the regional policy plan is the one of mitigation and making it more predictable for the development community in terms of knowing the costs up front. And for that reason, the draft of this plan has an option for a cash mitigation payment for 4 areas of the plan: water resources, open space, transportation, and affordable housing. And this option is also linked to that same land use vision map that I described earlier. One thing I should mention before I go on, that we've had some requests in terms of doing an analysis of this mitigation and what it would cost for, let's say, new development and redevelopment in the different mapped areas. We are working on that and hope to have that to share with you in the next few weeks. We don't have it currently today, but we are going to have it very shortly. Other goals for this plan were to make it a simpler and an easier to read document. And this is an example. What will be the format of the planning section. What you have right now is just text, but it'll fit into a format that's color-coded with the goal for the planning section on the left, with the commission actions for that goal below, and the town recommended town actions, accompanied by a resource map on the right. And there'll be, like I said, many more maps in this plan. This is an example, I believe, from one of the water resource sections. And then accompanying that in the regulatory section of the document, again, it will also be color-coded, that same color code for that resource area. It'll act as more of like a matrix with links to technical bulletins. Applicants are pretty familiar with those. Those are resources that the Commission has to help applicants complete the requirements to comply with the performance standards. Other goals we had were to make the planning section have measurable actions. And for that reason, we limited each goal in the planning section to 3 commission actions. These are the priorities that the commission has identified for the next 5 years, and each of these actions should also be measurable so we can track our progress over the next 5-year period. And those are on the left in this example, and on the right are the town actions. These are recommended actions we hope the towns will take in pursuing their local comprehensive plans and those plan updates. Oh, well, I flashed by that slide, but just a little briefly on the changes to the regulatory section. First of all, under land use, there's a new goal and minimum standard here linked to the regional land use vision map. With a requirement that development be consistent with the land use categories. Those are the categories such as economic centers and so forth. A requirement for compact development in mixed use to the extent feasible in the towns, and infrastructure to support development, again, in these designated areas. In the economic development section, there are 4 new goals, including building on our economic strengths, providing a balanced economy, regional income growth, and efficient use of infrastructure. This section has, like the land use sections, the companion to it in economic development, a location requirement for development to be in economic centers and these other designated areas. There's a limited requirement for formal market and economic studies wage standards and local workforce standards, and an infrastructure requirement that it meet existing demand and improve services, particularly telecommunication. The water resources section has been revised to try to make it simpler to understand, and it's been split. The goals and the standards have been split into distinct resource areas. For example, surface water quality is split into a different section from stormwater and so forth. Try to break those down a little bit, make them easier to understand. And there's a greater emphasis on low impact design in this version of the plan, and one of those monetary payment options to offset nitrogen impacts in sensitive embayments. The coastal resource section, we had the same goal here, was to make it simpler to understand, and we reorganized the goals and the standards here to correspond to the various coastal resource areas. And there's a focus on hazard mitigation as a basis for either allowing or prohibiting development in flood-prone or high-hazard areas. In the open space section, again, one of those options for mitigation payment, this would be based on assessor's data, and we're allowing an open space credit for use of low impact design. This is more a passive stormwater technique. Also, there would be no open space required for redevelopment in either growth incentive zones or economic centers up to certain clearing limits, and a lesser open space requirement for new development in those same mapped areas if there aren't significant resources. In the transportation section, again, the mitigation payment option is available in economic centers, actually only in these areas under this proposal. This would mitigate all the project's trip reduction and congestion impacts without the requirement for a traffic study. But outside of those areas, an applicant would be required to fully mitigate and analyze the congestion impacts. So there's a different approach for the mapped areas. And then a cash buyout provision for locations with less than 25 peak hour trips. The waste management section, we have defined or redefined the definition of hazardous material to focus on what would create a significant impact to groundwater. And there are two new standards in this section that allow a credit for redevelopment projects if they remove hazardous materials either from their site or from another site within the same wellhead protection area, thereby cleaning up some older, less well-regulated development and allowing a credit towards a project that does include some hazardous materials. And then in the energy section, there's a new goal and standards here focusing on design and construction techniques to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and our energy costs, and a proposal that new construction meet 10% of their on-site peak energy demand through on-site renewable energy generation. There are options to meet this requirement. Could do the 10%, also meet 5% on site and participate in the Cape Light Compact's green program, or be a LEED certified building. So there's 3 ways to meet that requirement. And then there are several new energy efficient best practices. These and other best practices you see in the plan are designed to be considered as project benefits in the Commission's evaluation of DRIs. And then finally, affordable housing in the residential projects, mitigation payment option if greater number of units are being provided than if it were being created affordable housing that is on site. A new requirement proposed that commercial DRIs be required to contribute to affordable housing. This is a result of the Nexus study in 2005 that showed that commercial development does contribute to the affordable housing situation on Cape Cod. And that amount would be discounted for projects in economic centers, and an adjustment applied. If a project is providing jobs that have higher than the average wages, there would be a factor applied to adjust that downward. Now, just briefly in terms of next steps, obviously we're in the middle of the 60-day public comment period. That will run until August 4th, so another 5 to 6 weeks. This is our 3rd of 3 public hearings, and we have had the draft available on the Commission's website. I did bring some copies tonight, but you can also download that there as well as view the maps if you'd like to do that. We've been making a lot of announcements through the press about the plan and conducting outreach to various interest groups. And following this 60-day public comment period, we'll have 30 days to revise the draft and then submit that to the Assembly of Delegates for adoption as an ordinance. And as I said in the beginning, we anticipate that that will be in September of this year. That concludes my presentation, but I or other staff, there's several staff here available to answer questions if anybody has them.
Thank you, Sharon. Sharon, is there a sign-up sheet?
We're done with this? Sharon, are we done with the,
The fact that you have not indicated a wish to speak will be recognized later. But first, I would call on those folks who have indicated that they would like to be heard.